Everyone enjoys a clean aquarium. It's always nice to be able to scape your aquarium and see the fish that you put in it without having to struggle when looking into the tank. And you just get a sense of accomplishment when you can just see into your tank and don't have to think about anything else. You get to see the plants that you may have planted, the fish, maybe you have shrimp, or just a really cool aquascape that you really enjoy. But then one day you accidentally get a imbalance or the light was left on too long and you end up with a green water aquarium. This is one of the most annoying things you can find in the hobby, and not because of the algae, it's just that you just can't enjoy your fish tank anymore. See, as we're looking at a tank that has fake plants and a rock, and the only part of the rock you can see is that little dark spot there, and then you get to see a little bit of the gray gravel, but other than that you can't even see inside of it. And the only stuff I have in this tank are snails that I am breeding and some shrimp also that I am breeding. But yeah, it's really annoying when you get a green algae water. But I'm going to tell you what you can do to help control it and what can cause it. So I hope you guys stay tuned. So as I was saying, I'm going to talk to you about what happens when you get green water inside your aquarium and what can potentially happen and what causes it. So what you're seeing when your water is now green is there's microscopic algae that's free floating throughout the water column, and that usually happens if there's an imbalance of nutrients in your water. So let's say that your nitrates are in check, maybe your iron's in check, your nitrite and your ammonia is good, but you get a surge of phosphates in your water, or any other type of trace mineral or nutrients that algae or plants can use, gets off balance, and you can actually start an algae bloom, which is all your green water is. Now, to be honest, the green water actually isn't unhealthy for your fish. You see, the algae works a lot like the plants that you would put in your aquarium that are alive, and they'll filter out the nutrients and the nitrates out of your water, which will actually make the water healthy for your fish. But it comes to a downside that you can't enjoy what your fish look like or your fish tank, and you can't see into it. And it has that, I mean, it's a cool color of green, but it's not a pleasant thing to go look. That, especially if you have like different tanks in your house and they're all crystal clear, and then you go to this other aquarium and it's green. Now, the green water can actually be very beneficial. You can, baby fish, fry, will like to actually feed on some of that algae that's free floating in the water for like their first few meals. And it can actually also help the fry or other fish feel relatively safe inside the aquarium because they are in a environment to where there's not complete visibility of them, and there isn't any, they don't have to really worry about predators being able to find them and eat them. But again, you can't see what your fry are doing or what your fish. And in this tank in particular, I am breeding snails and shrimp, so there's quite a bit of food going into the aquarium that the snails are eating on and the shrimp are eating on. But at the same time, that's also fueling this algae that's within my water. So a downside to the algae water, other than not being able to see into the tank, is if you have live plants. And if you have live plants that are down towards the bottom of your substrate or within your water column, the green water will actually block the light from getting down to them and eventually starving your plants out of light, and they can no longer go through the process of photosynthesis. However, if you have plants like duckweed or lilies, any type of aquatic plant that floats on top of the water, they are generally unaffected because they are getting direct light from your aquarium, and the only thing they're competing with the algae is with nutrients, what they can pull from the water. So a couple good things that you can use to combat the ugliness that is the algae water is you can put duckweed in there. For example, duckweed is very good at pulling nutrients out of the water, and if they can pull out nutrients out of the water, then that's less food for the algae to actually grow and consume. So the more plants that you have in your aquarium that can at least take advantage of not being inside the tank exactly, then they can help take away the food source of the algae. Another thing that you can do, and it's really easy, it doesn't cost anything, is to take like a towel or a dark cloth or something and wrap around the aquarium and turn the lights off on it, and then when you wrap it around, you just keep it any other light from looking into the fish tank. And you don't want to wrap the entire tank over the top, because then you can actually choke it out from getting proper gas exchange and not get enough air into your water and eventually suffocate your fish. But as long as you wrap around all four sides of your aquarium, or even the bottom if it's a dirt bottom tank, and leave the lights off for about a week or so, you'll actually kill off the algae that's within your water, and it will clear up. And of course, then you want to do a water change. However, the downside to turning off the lights to your aquarium is, again, your plants. If you have any plants that are in the actual water column and you turn the lights off and prevent any type of light to get into the tank, then those plants are also not getting the light to go through photosynthesis, and they won't be able to thrive underneath that condition. Now, not all plants are going to die. But plants might just make it through it, but they'll probably melt back a little bit until light is turned back on, and then they can go through the whole process again. Also, it can kind of mess up your fish's cycle. So if you're going for 8 hours a day with the lights on, 16 hours off, and the fish gets accustomed to it, and next thing you know, it's off for about a week or so, and they haven't seen light, then it can kind of throw off their feeding schedule. Or if you're breeding fish, they might not breed right now because something has changed and they don't like it. And then when you turn the light back on, you might have your fish freak out and go over the tank because it's a sudden burst of light. So when you go to uncover your tank, just make sure you just take off the cover, but don't turn your aquarium lights on. That way the room light and other lights that you have around can help illuminate the tank and get your fish and stuff used to having that type of environment again. But that's one of the easiest and cheapest ways to do it. You also can do water changes, which I don't recommend doing that, because if you're going to do water changes, you have to do water changes frequently and often. And you'll have to do large quantities of water change. So for example, this 10-gallon aquarium, if I was to do a water change, I'd probably do a 75% water change today to fill it back up, and then probably come in at least tomorrow or the next day and do another 75% water change. Which sure, the water will be clean, and it'll be fresh water going into the aquarium, but again, it's more work on you. It's stressful on everything that's in the tank, including your fish, your plants, your snails, whatever it's inside your tank. It's stressful to keep going with the water level going up and down, and you're constantly putting new water in. Also, if you were to do that, and you do a water change a couple days, it's starting to clear up, and then you forget about it, and then you go back in and you're back to where you started with the algae bloom, because the water you may be putting in may also have the nutrients and stuff that that algae is using. So another thing that you can do is, it's more expensive, but it's to go buy a UV sterilizer. Now, a UV sterilizer is a light that is inside a case that the water passes through. And you can get them in your canister filter, you can get them in a hang-on-the-back filter, you can have an inline UV sterilizer. It all depends on what you need. But what the UV light does is it actually affects the actual cells within the algae. It basically makes them to where they can't reproduce, so they'll actually just die off and not multiply. And that will clear up your water within several hours to a couple days. And then you can leave that UV sterilizer on your tank and run it every so often, like maybe 4 hours a week at a time on a timer, and you won't have to worry about the algae bloom. And it also helps with parasites. So it's like doing multiple favors for your aquarium, but also can be just a band-aid. So if you don't figure out what's making the algae, what's throwing the imbalance in your water, then you'll continue to get algae bloom. But if let's say you have a fish tank that has nothing in it, and you happen to get this green water, a neat thing you could do is get like something like Daphnia, some type of filter feeder, and they will eat on this algae water for a long time. And that's actually one of their primary food sources, is the type of algae water. And they'll actually clear it up. So if you have a colony of Daphnia that you're raising up to feed the fry, or tiny shell dwellers, or whatever you're feeding them to, or if you're just doing it just to have a little bit of fun, it'll actually clear your tank up just by having Daphnia in it. Again, another thing is you could just wait it out. But waiting it out can take forever. To be honest, I've had this green water in this aquarium for about 2 weeks, and the water quality is good when I check it. The nitrates are within check. They're about 20 parts per million to 40 parts per million. Nitrite is 0, and ammonia is 0. And of course the filter and stuff's running, and I can see occasionally when the occasional shrimp swims across the glass, or of course the snails are going up and down. So there is some duckweed in this aquarium, but not really enough to actually combat this amount of algae. They're more of a preventive measure before having that type of effect. Now, if you want to, you can also drain the tank into like different containers, and then you can feed that water to your baby fry if you are raising some up, again, like I said, because it's a good source of protein and fiber and nutrients that they need to develop their bodies. And then you just fill your tank back up with regular water. But again, if you have stuff inside your tank, it could be a little bit stressful on them and stressful on yourself. So basically, in all, it's not a bad thing to have, but it is a little unsightly. But there are things that you can do. The biggest thing that I can tell anyone who's dealing with green water algae is they need to basically have patience. It's not something that will just be done and you flip the switch and it's done, it's all clear. It'll take some time. You might spend some hours to weeks to get this thing cleared up. Another thing to also mention is you can use carbon. And carbon is a good thing to actually pull out nutrients out of the water. They'll actually pull organics out of the water until they are used up, and that can also help using against this algae. Before, I actually had some orange water from food that I was feeding to my 100-gallon, and I threw a bag of carbon into it, and literally within like a day, it was like crystal clear. There was no color to the water, and it's a really good thing to use. I do believe you can also use sea Purgin, but I haven't used that yet, so I really can't talk about it. But I do want to try it, and I will eventually make a video on it and give you guys my feedback. So other than that, guys, I hope that if you're dealing with algae, water, or any type of algae issue, really, this applies the most of all the algae, that you learned something from this video, and maybe it gave you an idea of how to combat it, or even to use it to your advantage for feeding fry or whatever you're doing. If you did, guys, comment down below if you enjoyed this video, if you learned anything, and what steps you take for dealing with this green water algae, and I'd love to read them. Also, if you want more content